And on this St. Patrick's Day, two of Ireland's top politicians, the Prime Minister, known as the Taoiseach, and the Deputy Prime Minister, known as the Taoiseach, are in North America for bilateral talks with their counterparts here. Those talks focused on global conflicts in Ukraine, the Middle East, and of course restoring peace talks within Northern Ireland. I spoke with Micheál Martin, that is Ireland's Taoiseach, earlier this morning. Micheál Martin, it is a very busy day for you. Thank you very much for sparing some time for us.
You're more than welcome, David. Delighted to be on the show.
Taoiseach, you have met with Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau at the same time that your counterpart is meeting with the U.S. President Joe Biden this week. What is the core message that you're hoping to bring to both Ottawa and Washington?
Well, essentially, I think in this St. Patrick's week, I think it's an opportunity to reassert a very strong relationship between Canada and Ireland, and of course, the Taoiseach doing the same in terms of the United States and Ireland, and also an opportunity to raise many current issues. We have a very warm relationship with Canada, covering our economic relationship, cultural relationship, diplomatic, historic, and of course, political. So our trade, for example, is now total trade between the two countries, 15 billion Canadian dollars. There's been an exponential growth since the entering into force of the Canada-European Union trade agreement, the CETA agreement. And so I had an opportunity this week, for example, to meet some companies like Equal One in Ireland, Bevcraft, who now have presences in Canada, and of course the Mark Anthony Group, which has a very significant presence in Dublin. So that economic dimension was an aspect of our discussions with Prime Minister Trudeau. We obviously discussed international issues, the very strong support from Canada to Ukraine and its sensitivities to the vulnerability of European security. And also we discussed Gaza and the need for a ceasefire, in addition to unimpeded access for humanitarian aid into Gaza. And we both agreed on the urgency of that. In addition, of course, the release of all hostages from Gaza. The hostage taking is a heinous crime in itself. Mm-hmm. And in our view, hostages should be released. And then we both agreed, the Prime Minister and I, about the necessity to get this onto a political track with a ceasefire towards a two-state solution.
Many areas, Taoiseach, of overlap, certainly, but there are some areas of friction, particularly on that issue of Gaza following those October 7th Hamas attacks. We notice a difference in the way that Canada and Ireland have approached this, particularly with funding to UNRWA. When Canada and a number of other nations suspended that funding, Ireland actually increased its funding. What does that show about Ireland's approach to the situation in Gaza?
Well, I think we have far more in common. I wouldn't describe it as friction, to be fair. I think what our position on UNRWA, and I would have had experience in Gaza before in 2009 when I was last Foreign Minister for Ireland, and I've kept a long-term interest in this subject. One simply cannot distribute humanitarian aid across Gaza or indeed deliver the teaching in the schools or get the schools re-established or medical clinics without UNRWA. I think most people are agreed in the end of the day that UNRWA is the only organization right now that has the bandwidth and the depth to distribute humanitarian aid across Gaza and indeed the West Bank and indeed go further into Lebanon and Jordan across the board. And as Philippe Lazzarini from UNRWA said to me when he came to Dublin some weeks ago, in the aftermath of this terrible war, we will need UNRWA for the reconstruction of Gaza. And remember, thousands and thousands of young children have been without education. And the only feasible way of enabling them to return to education quickly is via the UNRWA structures and personnel. Up to 13,000 people employed by UNRWA in Gaza. It's a United Nations mandated agency and received an overwhelming mandate from the United Nations recently. And Ireland, along with Canada, we operate at a multilateral level, very much within the framework of the United Nations Charter. And that has been, we've had great cooperation on many issues at that level, particularly in terms of women, peace and security. Also in terms of the protection of journalists. Canada has been to the fore in developing coalitions around the protection of journalists and human rights defenders, all of which, of course, has significant application in Gaza also.
Did the assertions, Taoiseach, that UNRWA, some members of UNRWA, some staff of UNRWA had been involved in the October 7th attacks and the evidence that followed that, did that bring concern to your government?
Yeah, well, I think Philip Lazzarini, the Director General of UNRWA, I mean, he took very prompt action. He sacked those that were referenced in the Israeli intelligence that communicated to UNRWA that these 13 individuals were involved. Their investigation is now underway, but I think UNRWA took very, very immediate and strong action in sacking people without any evidence really being put forward in terms of written corroborated evidence. But I think that showed intent by UNRWA, but also habitually and for quite a while, UNRWA has submitted all the names of its employees in Gaza to Israel. The two investigations underway, one internally within the United Nations, and we would ask everybody to cooperate with those investigations. And then the second, a more external review by Catherine Colonna, the former Foreign Minister of France, I think are important steps to assure people in respect of the systems within UNRWA to ensure that that type of activity does not happen. But the enormity of the humanitarian crisis in Gaza is one that we're very conscious of, particularly having spoken to many people in different UN agencies. And Sigrid Kaag, for example, the UN envoy to Gaza, spoke recently to the European Union foreign ministers. And she said the situation was catastrophic. And she was saying to us that no one should be under any illusions that if an invasion happens into Rafah, for example, it would have the direst of consequences for the civilians of Gaza. And also, all of the agencies make it clear to us that without UNRWA, you will simply not be in a position to provide the necessary humanitarian aid and supplies, education services, health services that are required in this catastrophic situation.
All right, Taoiseach, we will need to leave it there. Certainly a lot of debate and discussion going on the stage. This is also, of course, we're speaking to you on St. Patrick's Day. And if I may, if you'll permit my pronunciation here, Laufela Paudrig Sunadit.
That's very good in terms of your pronunciation. Agus Laufela Paudrig Honna Ditfein Chuma.
Very good. Thank you very much, Taoiseach, and have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you indeed. Take care.